Welcome to yet another episode of the Hello Irlandia Show. Tonight we are live streaming a special Irish edition called Free Flowing Conversations. I am Aga Qubica.
And I'm Katarzyna. Czekaj.
And we are your hosts. We have prepared for you a great deal of new and vital information in a digestible, but also hopefully entertaining form. And we are very happy that you have decided to join us tonight. We think it will be well worth your time because we are going to talk about, out in the open as of recently, the Great Reset.
We are excited to welcome our guests. Fiona Marie Flanagan, a former academic economist and investment banker, and now a citizen journalist, and Michael Sullivan from FREEPRESS.IE, a fast-growing new media platform. Ireland's front page for the big picture, real news and options. They are revolutionizing the news by telling the truth. So I would like to ask Fiona what the Great Reset is, at least on the face of it, right? As it is being presented recently in various newspapers, magazines, recently released books, or even aired TV programs, like, for instance, the recent one with Professor Luke O'Neill on RTE. Who are the key advocates for that transformation, known also under the name of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, which seems to address pretty much every aspect of our lives? Who is the author of this idea and the actual phrase, the Great Reset?
Okay, gosh. So there's a lot in that, but in essence, okay, the Great Reset is a global plan to transform every aspect of our lives and monitor and control absolutely everything that we do through technology and surveillance. Okay, so it's in effect a global plan to get rid of capitalism as we have it now, and of course it's far from perfect, the capitalist system we have now. It's more like crony capitalism, which I could argue, on another sort of strand of the conversation, was designed to fail. But what it's going to do is get rid of capitalism, our free enterprise, and replace them with a technocracy. And a technocracy, if you like, and I am going to liken it to fascism, where you basically have totalitarian control of organizations. So you have a partnership, a fascism-style partnership between government and key global corporations at the top. They will control all resources, and then you have the rest of us, 99% if you like, at the bottom, completely monitored, controlled and surveilled across every single aspect of our lives. Now, it's absolutely totalitarian, it's draconian, it's dystopian, in my view. I'm giving you that. But this plan has been it's been conceived and it's been operationalized over the past 50 years. So it's not actually a new initiative or a new idea. And if you want to think about the global players, I will give you the institutions you should keep an eye on and the key figures within those institutions who will take this agenda forwards. We'll start with, obviously, the World Economic Forum, which is the institution, the key institution driving through this Great Reset. And we have Professor Klaus Schwab, who is the leader of the World Economic Forum, and he is, if you like, one of the key global figureheads of this initiative. Now, in 2019, the World Economic Forum signed a strategic partnership with the United Nations, the head of whom is Antonio Guterres. Now, you probably have seen a lot of him through the COVID pandemic. And again, they are working together to bring forward the Great Reset. And many of your listeners and viewers may have already heard of United Nations Agenda 2030. Well, the Great Reset is in effect an implementation of this agenda. These agendas converge. They're wrapped up together in the Sustainable Development Goals, so they're not really anything different. You try and think of them as effectively the same thing, but the Great Reset is the impetus to get all these Sustainable Development Goals in place and implemented. And obviously, COVID has been the trigger. So also, we have the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. So if you like to think of the UN, the IMF, the World Bank, the World Economic Forum, they are the key global institutions here. They're all interrelated together, okay? So they all cooperate, and they have all been set up for the sole purpose of global governance. Now, I can take, obviously it's a bit outside the scope of this conversation, but the United Nations was set up after World War II, ostensibly to bring countries together in peace and to ensure we would have global peace going forward. But the backdrop or the underlying agenda for the United Nations was always to spearhead global governance. So what I'm saying to you guys is that we're right now at the precipice where COVID-19, the pandemic, is the trigger or the accelerant to bring these agendas together. They have been planned. They have been meticulously and detailed in their planning over the past 50 years, but particularly in the last few years leading up to this. So it's not a new concept. It's only been launched on the world as a new concept. But it, as I say, it has been in motion. And, I can get into all aspects of it, but it's global. It's happening. We have no say in it. They're breaking down our democracies. They're subverting our democratic systems by imposing these mandates upon us. And the consequences for this are going to be monumental for every man, woman, and child on the planet. So hopefully I've given you a little bit of a background as to what this is and who are the players.
Okay, thank you. So, Michael, what is your take on this forthcoming evolution? Like, is it indeed inevitable? Do all elements of the Great Reset bring potentially negative effects into the social and economic life in the sense of losing personal and economic freedoms? Are there any positives in that concept, or should we be really, really worried?
I don't personally think there'd be lots of positives if there was a Great Reset, but I don't think we should be talking about it like it's inevitable, Like I completely agree with most of the stuff that Fiona said there. Like this has been tried in different iterations for hundreds of years, There's been attempts at empire and global governance since the British Empire, like the sun never set in the British Empire, and then you had communism and you had half the world under the yoke of communism. I think this is just another version of it, I think there's a lot of, I wouldn't say fear mongering, but I would say that we're almost conditioned to be afraid of everything these days. And I don't think it's inevitable. I think there is a battle between different factions in the world, and I'm a bigger picture person myself. I think what's going on in the US is critical to understanding the whole idea of a Great Reset. I think the Great Reset, when it boils down to it, is just it's a fancy package. It's a way for them to sell it to regular people who think to themselves, things have been so bad for so long in the world. Yeah, sure, we need a Great Reset. It's a way for them to abdicate their responsibilities for the issues that they've caused in the world, like people like, as Fiona talked about, the IMF and the World Bank. But the key thing to remember, I think, is that this Great Reset doesn't work and doesn't happen without the United States on board. And what's happening with the election recounts and the legal challenges that are happening in the US are, not enough people are paying attention to them, I don't think, because I do believe that Trump is going to be in there again. And if he pulls out of the Paris Climate Accord and the UN as he is doing, and the World Health Organization as he is doing, thankfully, their Great Reset doesn't happen. And this is, if you think back, this is almost as like communism pushed against the US until it fell in the early 1990s. It's coming to a head right now, just as it did then. And if he gets back in, then this Great Reset doesn't happen, because they cannot do it without the US economy being a part of it. So, sorry, I know I'm kind of gone off there, but my point is that it's not inevitable. But if it does happen, I don't see any positives in it. No, because we're going to lose personal sovereignty. We're going to lose economic sovereignty. We're going to lose self-determination. Ultimately, the same people who are selling out our countries to the European Union, like Irish politicians like Brian Hayes, who, would be a perfect example. These guys just want to climb on the top of Irish people to get into their version of Hollywood, which is the UN and the EU and that, we're not going to do well out of it. Our politicians are not going to represent us, and I really have no idea how it will end, but I don't think it's a good thing for sure,
Okay, so in this case, I just will come back to one point that Fiona has already made, suggesting that the COVID-19 pandemic looks to be rather a trigger or something that speeded up the process. Maybe because there was not enough enthusiasm for that plans, because they were kind of, the elements of it were being passed on and put forward. Now that whole package is being sold to us like under the name of the Great Reset, but also there's another phrase that a lot of politicians seems to be using, build back better, or something that probably everybody already hates by now, which is a new normal, right? But pretty much all these phrases, they hold kind of the same thing, really, like a total transformation of our life. So do you both agree that essentially the COVID-19 was rather something that was kind of used, really, a plan for speeding it up, or the whole situation is just a mere consequence of the COVID-19 as it is being presented, I believe, in the mainstream narrative, right? So, Fiona, what do you think?
Yes, I believe COVID-19 is being used as the trigger, as the accelerant for this agenda. And, Klaus Schwab himself said that under sort of normal conditions, if you want to call them normal, we had a stock market which under the Trump administration was actually doing very well. Although with my economic hat on, I can tell you that my view is it was a more inflation into an already inflated bubble under the Obama administration. So my view is that Trump, with his policies, just pumped more air into the balloon. But in any case, Schwab's point was well made, in that people just didn't have the appetite globally to make these dramatic and drastic changes to the way our economies are organized, and in fact that our lives are conducted across all aspects of society. And that it took this crisis, and you know how they say never let a good crisis go to waste, it took this crisis for them to be able to launch upon the world and convince us all that we need to change, that this is our opportunity, that we cannot let slip by, and that we need to address the problems that our global society faces, such as, global inequalities, social unrest, conflicts, nationalism, which Klaus Schwab thinks is a very negative thing, racism, etc. So we have all and a key aspect, or a key crisis that these global players identify is in fact the climate crisis. And I'll state my position very, very clearly on this. I do not subscribe to anthropogenic global warming at all. I acknowledge climate change, of course, the climate has always been changing and it always will change. But in terms of man-made CO2 specific contributions to temperature changes, I, as an empiricist, have not seen any empirical evidence to convince me that that relationship holds, and never mind what sort of quantification you can put on the contribution that CO2 has on global temperatures. So I believe in my research that the climate crisis has been hijacked with the CO2 narrative to focus it on man's activities, human beings' activities, and our carbon emissions. And therefore, this ties very nicely into the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and also into the Great Reset. So everything is converging into this one point. The COVID crisis is now giving everybody the opportunity to say, look, we don't conduct our lives properly. See how much the environment has improved because we're not flying anymore. See how much greener everything can be if we don't drive around in our cars anymore. So, they're using the lockdown and the restrictions to say, see, look what we can do going forwards, etc. So, I would like to counter some of Michael's points, if I can, on the importance of the US in this agenda. And I agree with you, Michael, the US is critical. It's absolutely pivotal to driving this forward. But as far as Trump is concerned, I fear right up until this point, the US has aligned with the Great Reset absolutely every step along the way, lockstep. Trump's
up until 2016, maybe.
No, right through now. I mean, at the end of the day, right now, the US has a state of emergency. The vaccines are being rolled out by the military. 5G is being implemented. There have been lockdowns in the States to varying degrees. Mask mandates are on the way. So if you want to tick the box on the lockdown implementation, the US has pretty much got all those in place. Or
if I may add something, not everything. Thanks. Not everything is dependent on Trump in this game, because the state lockdowns, of course, they are all dependent on the particular governors, and
But there are also federal mandates going down to the states.
That's true.
There are incentives that have been given by the federal government through each state per COVID case, financial incentives, and that is true.
Did that come down through Medicaid? Did it? That's one thing I wasn't sure of. Was that was Medicaid who announced?
No, central government, federal government have done that. Okay. There's evidence on that. So to cut a long story short, the issue with the climate, Trump and the Paris Climate Accord, that may well be, but if you go to any state or any region in the US, same as around the world, and you Google climate action plan, what you're going to find is that each one of us lives in an area or a council or a district that has a climate action plan operationalized and going. And, it has been done through what's called the Delphi technique, consensus building. So what you're probably seeing around you in the areas you live in is varying degrees of road closures or cycle lanes being opened, trees being cut down. All these things are going on now through these climate action plans across the world, in the US as well, that our local councils or our regions, or however they're organized, have signed up to. So that's happening. Again, I'll cut it short and say that what I fear is being fomented in the US is chaos. I really, really worry that what we're going to see is potentially civil unrest due to this election contest. I believe it's fraud, but that's neither here nor there. I worry
it is no doubt fraud.
We're going to have a calamity, and I pray that the US manages to get out of this. But to put it all on Trump, absolutely not. I see him as a player as much as any of the rest of them right now. I cannot see, to me, I look at what has been done as opposed to what's been said, and I can't identify to you anything that has gone against the actual global agenda. as it stands now.
I know what you're saying
So-
there, but one thing I'd say. Sorry, Aga.
No, go on.
In terms of him pushing back, I don't think America. Obviously, what I said was that the Great Reset, if it is which it probably is a thing, it can't happen without the US. Now, Trump took back control of the Federal Reserve in 2018 with an executive order. He brought it in under the Treasury, so he has control of it. And you mentioned the stock market there, and I would agree with you that the stock market is being pumped up by helicopter money that he's raining down. I mean, you can shake your head all you want, but that's the truth, right?
No. Listen. Trump doesn't control the Fed. The Fed is a private cartel.
I know it's a private bank, but he took
there's
it
no
under.
way Trump,
It-
as
it-
the
it's
US,
been- it's no
took it
longer-
under Treasury control. He took it under
Actually,
Treasury
yes,
control.
yes, Michael, you're right. It was
Thank you.
in March 2020, as of the beginning of the pandemic, when he merged Treasury with the Federal Reserve, and he put
Exactly.
Robert Mnuchin in charge of it. But people on the let's say leftist media outlets, they were lamenting that it technically means that Trump is now in the control of the Fed. That's what they were raving about.
Yeah, you're right. And the Fed, up to this point, was lending money to the US state, obviously at interest. It was a private for-profit bank,
Like to
just
any other
like the
country.
ECB is. Yeah, and just like the IMF is. It's no longer that in the US. It has lost that control. Now, my own personal belief is that a lot of the... Well, okay,
No,
fine. I can send you the executive order later, but I suppose the point that we're saying it is that he's pushing back against that whole Great Reset idea, and why, if he's so into the Great Reset, do you think he's pulling out of the Paris Climate Accord?
But what I've said to you is he hasn't actually, to the extent that all the climate action plans are being implemented at a local level anyway.
Yeah, but he doesn't have control. The
deep-
US Constitution, the way it's set up, is states decide how they implement things. They have much more control than a lot of people understand. I'm not saying that you don't understand that, but the states decide that. Sorry, again, I'm not too sure why you're smirking, but the states decide on their implementation. Let me give you...
These mandates come down through the United Nations.
Let me give you an example. Let me give you a quick example of how states do things differently. Okay, if you take South Dakota, okay, they didn't put mask mandates in. They didn't do lockdowns. They've had zero almost COVID deaths. They've had one of the lowest COVID numbers. Now, put that against Democrat New York and New Jersey.
Actually, I'm sorry, Michael, if I can just add, there were 5 states that never locked down during the lockdown. It was Wyoming and a few other states. I can't remember right now. Probably Nebraska. They never locked down because officially they implemented. Yeah, they're perfectly fine. They implemented all the right measures. They put it in place, and those states, of course, were Republican. All the other Democratic states closed down.
So that illustrates the point I'm trying to illustrate there, Fiona, is that it's not federal dictates that are deciding on a state level how environmental initiatives are being implemented. It's not Trump who's deciding to go through with all of the Paris Climate Accord agreements. It's happening, as you said, on a local level. So I'm looking at things on a bigger picture, and I'm saying that
but the mandates, Michael, at the local level ultimately come down, and I've looked at them in Ireland. So this would be the same model. Would you mind letting me finish my point? They come down from the United Nations, which is obviously the key institution that's pushing through this climate change agenda. And in the case of Ireland, they come through the UN, down through the EU, down into the Irish central government, and then they are distributed around to the councils and to the boroughs and to the counties.
I agree.
And then they are implemented conditional upon, obviously, the environmental uniqueness or idiosyncrasies of whatever region we're in. So, for example,
there's no doubt that's true.
There's no doubt that's true. We would have different climate objectives somewhat than an inland region, for example. But fundamentally, we're all signed up to these accords, and we're all en route to 2030.
Yeah, but we were talking about America there and how they're pushing back against the Great Reset potentially. So maybe if we keep it on America, the whole point, there's no doubt that Ireland is completely going along with this stuff, okay? We've had 30 years of brainwashing about climate science. We've now got Greta Thunberg. I mean, her great uncle is the guy who came up with the notion of greenhouse gases. He is the guy who invented the whole idea of greenhouse emissions. It's a complete scam. Couldn't agree with you more. But in terms of the Great Reset, which was the initial subject of the conversation, I think it's relevant that Trump does seem to be pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, even though some implementations are happening on a state level. He's also doing some stuff with the Federal Reserve, which is very interesting because it can't happen without the Federal Reserve being on board with that global economic movement to give us all a basic income and take away entrepreneurship. It's essentially socialism and communism.
Yeah.
So I would say that the Great Reset can't happen without the US being on board. And I do think there's a lot of hope that they are pushing back against it. They are holding on to their economic sovereignty. They are going back into an isolationist stance, which they had pre-World War I, which they were dragged into. They were dragged into World War II. If they get back to that point again, then the Great Reset can't happen. So my point to finish is there's really, really positive signs and good reasons to be hopeful that all this nonsense will all fall apart, just like communism fell apart in the late 80s and early 90s.
So to quickly sum up, Fiona, may I ask you, do you think Trump is just one of the players like on the globalist agenda? He's basically one of them going on with the plan, that he isn't fighting them. You think he's on board with them? That's your opinion?
In my opinion, totally. I believe presidents are selected, not elected. That's what Roosevelt said. I think the last president...
Thanks to the Dominion machines also, as we now find out.
Oh, indeed. I think the last president that genuinely took on the establishment and the Federal Reserve and the CIA ended up, in a not a very happy position. That was JFK. So my read of it is that Obama was put in place in order to destabilize the Middle East. Unfortunately, remember the Arab Spring. And Trump was then put in so that the plans could be advanced because the Republican patriots would never have stood by and let a Democrat president preside over, removing their constitutional rights, because Trump did suspend the US Constitution and then he renewed that suspension just a few weeks ago. So I honestly believe that Trump was put there to set the stage to placate the Republicans and the sort of the more patriotic movement to foment this populism, which, there's so much of it I would agree with. I have to say, if my inclination would be definitely more towards populism than it would be towards, the sort of hard left liberalist agenda. But I just fear that they're both sides being played off each other into an order out of chaos situation. And I see Trump, although I believe he will be victorious, I believe that at the end of this investigation into the voting fraud, that he will be retained as president. But I do not see, given that there is no difference right now in terms of the Great Reset and how far it's been pushed in the US, and the US is collapsing as we speak economically. The debt is absolutely unsustainable. The poverty is rising, unemployment is rising. It's a very, very difficult situation for that country.
Unemployment was down now, and it's been down before COVID. He had the most successful job market in the history of the US, including minorities, including white people.
That is correct.
There's a huge increase in jobs since he has tried to.
But guys, listen, we can talk economic statistics all we like, because
I'm not talking economic statistics. It's just unemployment is not up. Can I ask you a question, Fiona? If Trump is globalist overall, why did he pull out of TTIP and CETA? TTIP was the ultimate globalist weapon. It was essentially going to allow free trade between the US and Europe. It was going to remove all protections we had on food. I mean, we know that there's different food standards and everything else. One of the first things he did was destroy that. Now, for him to have destroyed that and still want to be a globalist is a big contradiction. I'm not trying to catch you out or anything. I can see where you're coming from. I can see where you're coming from.
I can come back at you there, because he may have pulled out of that, but he then went and signed the USMCA trade deal, which regionalizes trade between the US, Mexico, Canada, and obviously America itself. And that is a globalist dream. So what that does is it actually renders those countries subordinate to a regional authority over all of them.
Similar to NAFTA, right?
It's more of an open borders between those three countries. So in
Which they had with NAFTA before.
Globalism, that USMCA trade deal is a globalist deal, which Trump did sign up to.
Yeah, but he replaced NAFTA, which was there prior to that, the North American Free Trade Agreement. Now, one of the interesting parts of that new trade agreement that you're talking about between Mexico and Canada was it allowed member states to investigate other member states for fraud. Now, the US is currently investigating the Trudeau administration for a number of corruption, basically incidences of corruption with evidence that was submitted from some very litigious Canadians. Now, that provision was not in NAFTA previous to that. So what I would say is it probably isn't a reason to say that Trump is a globalist just because he enacted that new trade agreement, because NAFTA was there before and it actually gave Mexico and Canada much more favorable terms than the new agreement did. So I don't know if NAFTA was there before. Does that mean that Trump is a globalist? I have to disagree with you on that. I think all the signs that he's given us since he's come into office are that he's not a globalist. He could be a complete, just put there to make us think that it's okay. But I personally have a lot of hope that all is not a scam, all is not a hoodwink. There is a possibility that he is a good guy and there are a lot of good people around him. And I think he's basically our only hope if there is going to be an end to this Great Reset thing, because who else is going to stop it if he doesn't?
I agree.
I'm just hopeful,
I agree, and I would also like to point to the fact that we now have this fraudulent election going on, and again, on the surface, everything looks like Trump lost, Biden's going to move into the White House, but we actually know that what is going on. And, I can't even say it's happening behind, because like half of the society can see through the scam. Like we literally see that there was a voter fraud, and we honestly, I know that there has been some fantastic news circulating on the internet about some watermarks on the ballot, this and that. But I'm saying we don't need those, because you can see with a naked eye that there was a fraud, and it's all going to be brought up in court, and it's going to be proven. And Trump is taking a step back. Kayleigh, the White House press secretary, said, we're going to hear from Trump at the right time. But what is happening now, the lawyers are fighting. And, eventually we're going to find out that all the proof's going to be laid out. But on the surface, it looks like, Trump lost, nothing's, the Biden administration is proceeding. And I wanted to extrapolate kind of, on the situation with all the globalist agenda and all the situation there, that we may see on the surface that, maybe it doesn't look like changes are taking place, but they are taking place. The problem is public is not really paying attention, especially the left side of the public is not paying attention because they are listening to the fake news media, which are not giving them the truth.
More of them are, though. I think more and more of them are realizing, and this is what has
That
been
is true. That is true. But the point is, until now, when people are massively realizing that there is something shady, really fishy going on, if you take a step back 2 years and you look at all the executive orders that Trump introduced, people don't know about them, can't go back, can link to them, but he's been setting up everything against the globalist agenda to push through with his plan of actually destroying and fighting them. And maybe people don't realize because they can't connect all the facts, but things have been happening and Trump has been giving us signals. The fact that not everybody is able to notice it, it only, gives you, a good sense of how the public opinion is manipulated by the media.
Yeah.
And also, not only by the mainstream media, but there are many other agents on the internet who are trying to push some false narratives and convince us, of whatever agenda they have. So we have to fight not only against the mainstream media, we also have to fight those false narratives circulating around. So
yeah, I agree.
Okay, can I just maybe put one question that keeps popping out here, and maybe Fiona, because there was actually directly to you. There was something about New Order Barbarians interview and transcript. Have you heard something about that, Fiona?
No.
Are they a rugby team? Are they?
I'm not sure this is just a question from one of our listeners. And the other one that keeps popping out, and I think it's valid. Someone was asking if there is the green agenda, right? That is connected, seems to be clear, with the Great Reset. Why there is a distraction of the business, kind of middle small business going on? So maybe if you want to tell us something more about, Fiona, how that fits into the Great Reset and the climate change. Yeah, there is exactly a question, again popping out about
small businesses
destroying retail and small business, and
Yes.
if this is about the green agenda.
Yeah, okay. As the objective is effectively technocracy, which, as I said, is effectively fascism.
And hospitality business as well.
Hospitality, yes. So if you go into the World Economic Forum website, you will be able to see the global partners in this initiative, and therefore you'll be able to understand the key global companies that will survive and dominate the industries going forward. They have been selected. So, for example, you will have Amazon, you will have Walmart, you will have big tech companies, you will have big pharma, and they will control all aspects of the economy. A necessary requirement for this, now this is their plan, I don't agree with it, but this is what they want to do, is obviously to get rid of, they do not want any small businesses operating and thriving in any of these industries, because they want to take global control over the resources. So fundamental to this, as I said, is that sadly that small businesses will no longer thrive. And an offshoot of the lockdowns, because there's actually no medical scientific justification for lockdown at all. There's no evidence that it saves any lives or ever has. In fact, up to last year, the World Health Organization did not recommend lockdown in the case of the pandemic. So we have to then scratch and think, well, what is the real objective for lockdown? Because the medical science doesn't support it. And obviously an outcome, sadly, is that hospitality, retail, and smaller businesses are struggling and will ultimately fail, most of them, I'm sorry to say, because rolled into the agenda going forward is, with the climate change, there will be severe restrictions on our carbon footprint and our ability to travel. The fact that we've been constrained to, let's say 3 kilometers or 5 kilometers within these lockdowns is a form of conditioning. It's a form of behavior modification, so that we get used to these kinds of restrictions and we get used to operating in a more confined radius. So our ability to travel will be restricted. Our ability to fly will be restricted. Our ability to, the restaurant industry will, takeaways will be the order of the day. So they want us at home, effectively. They want us teleworking, telemedicine, tele-entertainment, tele-retail, tele-education, with obviously artificial intelligence and all the Internet of Things at our disposal. But obviously you can see that going out, restaurants, cultural activities, entertainment, theatre, opera, cinema, all of these things do not feature in the long-term plan for the Great Reset.
Yeah, but there are a lot of people pushing back against that, which is a great thing as well, though. There's a lot of bars trying to open up in Dublin. All over the US, businesses are pushing back and saying, no, we're not having it anymore. So again, people are fighting back against that stuff. So it's not inevitable that it's going to mean we have to go along with this rubbish, And I mean, people need to consider what happened in the past again, because, nothing is new in this world. Stalin, one of the first things he did was collectivize the farms, okay? Take away people's independence. That's what killing small businesses is about, okay? When you take away the ability of people to make their own money. That is freedom. It's like what he did with the small farmers. They could grow their own food, and they were the people that Stalin was most afraid of, you know. So he killed them all. He put all their farms together, and that was the end of them. This is communism that's happening across the world. It's dressed up as the Great Reset. It's dressed up as XYZ. It's about control. It's about communism, and there's an element of fascism in there, which is pretty much the same thing when you roll it all up. Fascism, one of the central parts of fascism is corporate and state cooperation. If you look at Amazon and you look at all of those big companies, that's what we're seeing right now. They're hoovering up all the businesses. That's what killing all the small businesses is about as well. Focusing all of that business into a few different entities. And that is, it's corporate socialism as well, which is what we've had for 20, 30 years, which is, you know, they get bailed out, the banks get bailed out, the airlines get bailed out, but people don't. They get socialism, people get hard capitalism. You know, that's what's going on here. It's communism. And Klaus Schwab can get dressed up in his Ming the Merciless costume and wear a black robe with his crests and everything else and go around like he's, you know, offering the world some kind of utopia. He's a communist who wants total control, just like the Chinese CCP have pushed a lot of this virus narrative with their lies that came out at the start of COVID. It's all one big pile of communism that's creeping across the world, and totalitarianism. And that's why people are pushing back. And the more people realize that, the better. It's not inevitable. The Green New Deal stuff, by the way, sorry, just to say, the Green New Deal stuff in the US and the climate change is just another part of it. It's about making people hate the fact that they're alive, feeling guilty for living their lives, burning fossil fuels, which is perfectly natural. It's all part of a communist agenda, in my opinion, anyway, you know. And that's why small businesses need to push back, say no, and ask the government for proof that PCR tests find COVID, that COVID has been isolated in a test tube, which is the gold standard of viral verification. Businesses need to say no more, you know, and to really get together. And one of the things that I was so disappointed with in March and April was that all the small businesses didn't have the cop on to see what was going on and band together and fight back. But they seem to be slowly starting to do it now because it's dawning on them what's at stake here. So I hope that continues, you know.
Okay, so I just wanted to then go back to Fiona and ask, because it looks like Michael is very positive in the sense that he does believe that people have the power. Hopeful, yes, yeah, hopeful, positive. That the people have still the power to kind of push back against all those changes that are being presented to us, at least as something like that can be stopped. Do you think, Fiona, regardless whether you see Trump as, you know, a part of this pushback or not, do you see that indeed we have a chance, like that people can really change something if things are really turned around, if more people is gonna wake up to actually what's really going on? Like, what's your kind of hopeful version, you know, of events? How do you think it's
My
gonna
best,
play out?
I know. I fear, and I'll be brutally honest here, I fear that our best chance of doing anything as civilians was around about last March and April. In order not to let this thing go so far. The difficulty we had at the beginning was the level of brainwashing, the level of mind control, the level of programming, and we have had behavioral psychologists working with our governments to implement these stages to literally condition us into a new way of behaving and into this new abnormal. I fear that there's simply isn't or hasn't been enough people alert to the problem, prepared to accept it as a problem. I still see, even in the areas that I go around in day to day, complete compliance. The problem is, you've been saying there about small businesses, and yes, I absolutely hope that they start opening up, but there have been a lot of payouts, there have been a lot of bribes, there have been a lot of I'll pay you to stay home. And this is what's literally gone on. So you know, when you scratch your head and you wonder why X, Y, and Z, the vintners, for example, publicans, restaurateurs, up until this point haven't been agitating more, it's because a lot of money has changed hands. You know, a lot of money that will inevitably have to be paid back by the taxpayer, but that's another story. So, you know, Ireland, obviously, I despair at the level of compliance and the lack
I
of
hear you on
critical
that.
thinking that I see around me. And, you know, we don't get a lot of media, so it's only on the alternative media that we would see what's going on in Europe, for example, the pushbacks there. And obviously the States is sadly focused now on this election. We're taking its eye off the vaccination ball, which is coming around the corner, and they're going to have to deal with that, however way it's been pushed through. So to get back to your point, I know people need hope, and I know people look to Trump for hope, and I can understand why. I sadly don't see him as the agent of hope. And sadly, I think that people are too far conditioned en masse to do anything to push back against what is going on, because, you know, I have sat with a lot of people who are way more intelligent than me. We've covered every base. We've gone through every possible scenario, and we've all concluded that's covered. That's covered. That's covered. That's not to say that they'll win, because I actually genuinely don't believe this is going to happen. At the end of the day, I don't think they will get their reset. They will not get their dystopian world. It will be derailed eventually. But I fear that we collectively are going to have to go through severe pain. I worry about that. I pray I'm wrong. But I fear pain is coming because of our compliance, because, you know, whether we could have or not, it's again, you know, we can say it's a counterfactual. How would we ever know whether we could have pushed back? But we rolled over way too quickly, way too easily.
How do you see it playing out, though, the consequences?
Devastating. I see devastating consequences. So what I would like to do, if I can add any value tonight, is to get people focused on their own individual scenarios, to, you know, think about their own families, think about potential food shortages, think about, you know, all the worst possible scenarios that could happen, and plan for it so that you're not surprised. You're not taken aback. The best thing could happen is it doesn't happen, in which case you've got a few more, you know, tins of beans and, you know, sort of dried pasta hanging around that you need to get through. But if it does happen, you have prepared, you have put some planning in place, you've got your networks together, you've got your food, you know, you've got access to water. If the electricity goes off, because I'm hearing there could be power outages, I don't know, I'm hearing, I don't know for sure, but that you've all bases covered, because I fear that it's going to get a lot worse before it could get better.
Okay, so one more question before I let maybe Aga, because I think she has a question as well, kind of a bigger one. That's how I see it, and I'm hoping that indeed, as you said, people probably need to feel pain before you know, en masse they understand what's happening. And definitely, I would like to maybe talk a little bit more about what else we can do to prepare ourselves for any possible, you know, best scenarios, however short or long it can, you know, last. But in my personal opinion, and from kind of conversation with my husband as well, because he's very much on it, we feel that one thing that technocrats didn't take into the consideration, and it seems like they are just not seeing that element at all, that's actually the human spirit. As much as, of course, a lot of people is brainwashed still, and still thinks that, you know, it's gonna go back to some kind of normality eventually, without much of a turmoil. I think that this free spirit and the fact that, you know, people are waking up and they can't really go on, you know, for a very long time with some kind of spirituality, some kind of, you know, community, sense of community, as you know, that connection with other people, that our natural need to connect, to cooperate, and to be free, I think, above everything else. it will prevail. However, of course, we might come across quite a kind of dark time in the meantime. So we need to be prepared, and maybe a little bit more, apart from even the basic stuff like, preparing food, water, just have some kind of extras, for however long. What else can we do? How else we should, maybe set up the local community. What should we do apart from those basic things that you've mentioned already?
You want me to take that one?
Yes, 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 yes. And then,
I if you could, yes, networks are so important. I was only speaking to a friend today about if the electricity went off, or if we had, if we'd no power, how do we communicate with each other? And if how do we help each other out? Is there a place we can all gather together to actually keep warm and keep ourselves going through this? So your friends, your family, your networks, get your emergency contacts in place. If you have family abroad, figure out some way of trying to get to them. I mean, I have family abroad. I was thinking even through embassies if things really got bad. If you can, and I know this may not apply to many, sort out your finances, because the worry is that any dependency on the government and any debts that we have outstanding, if we lose our jobs, God forbid, that then puts us in a very, very precarious position. So if people can at all, and I know under the current situation it's a hard ask, but if they can get rid of debts, whatever, if you have any cash, pay off your debts is my advice. It's not financial advice, it's just my opinion. Okay, I must make that very clear. Is there any way, or any of your friends have any way that you can grow your own? I know Rowan Croft on Gran Torino has said this a lot, but he's absolutely right. Self-sufficiency, self-sustainability is the key, because that's the last thing these globalists and the Great Reset want. They want us totally dependent, interdependent, and dependent on them. So I guess your personal finances, do not have cash lying around, because when we have a currency reset, and we will all be reset on some form of digital-based currency going forward, the worry is that with the national debts rising across the world, that we will have, perhaps, again, this is me speculating, a US dollar collapse, perhaps, which may then precipitate bringing in the digital currencies. And in fact, in the US, there are plans on implementing a digital currency by the 31st of January. Obviously, it'll run in parallel with the US dollar to start with, but that is what they want to do. And ultimately, I guess the plan is to tie welfare, to tie benefits, to tie payments to this digital currency, and it will become a credit scorecard system going forward. But yeah, to get back to,
just on that cash point, can I just make a point on cash there? I would disagree that holding cash is a bad thing if all this doomsday stuff is going to happen, which, again, I don't think it's going to be that extreme if anything does happen. But cash is surely going to be a handy thing to have, because if there is a breakdown, you're not going to be able to get it out of an ATM because no one's going to be putting it in.
I should have qualified. In the bank. Don't have it in the bank.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
There could be a wealth tax. It could be confiscated. It may be frozen. Yeah. So cash, fair enough. Cash in your pocket, yes, of course, because inevitably people will actually accept it, I am sure, in transactions.
Yeah. And what is your take on digital coin or Bitcoin, all those forms of digital currency? Because somebody on the chat just raised this question. What do you guys think?
Oh, maybe we'll start. Oh, Fiona. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, Fiona?
Oh yeah, gosh, I've thought about this. And again, this is my personal view. I think they foster too much independence from the system. They're more self-contained. So I don't see them as being what the globalists want us to reset onto going forward. I see digital currencies as their preferred choice.
Globalists.
Yeah, the globalists, because they will have, ultimately the digital currency that's been implemented in the US will be controlled by the Fed, which still links up to the Bank of International Settlements, which still coordinates in with the global system of central banks. So my take is it will be more the digital currency route. is what they will want to end up
But
on.
would you advocate for people to, in the, so they
in
get
the short
digital
term?
in the short term, but like long term, what would you advocate for them to switch to?
To switch to metals. I would
Metals,
be more
okay.
of a, silver. If you can, gold, it would be my long-term, again, not financial advice, suggestion. Although I will say it has happened in the past that the government has confiscated holdings of gold. Don't say that this sort of thing couldn't happen in the future, but I wouldn't be necessarily advocating for Bitcoin. That's just me.
And Michael, what's your stand on it?
Yeah, again, I think it's a very advanced conversation for what we're talking about here. I think anything that is going to be impacted by this is going to happen 6 months to a year down the line. Again, that might be me being hopeful, but if they were to somehow do some kind of an end to welfare benefits in this country, you would have 500,000 people marching on and burning it down. You know what I mean? So I think just in the short term, if there is going to be any power outages to mess with people's heads and stuff like that, it's just basic common sense things like having enough food in your house, which you should always have anyway. And everybody should be growing their own food in some shape or form anyway. And if all this nonsense of the last year shows people that they should be doing that and cooperating with their neighbors to grow food, then that's a good thing, So definitely trying to grow your own foods. I mean, beyond that, really, what can you do? I mean, if you transfer all your assets into metals and Bitcoin and everything else, if there's no world to live in or spend it in, what's the point in having it? So I'd urge people to, be prudent and not have all their eggs in one basket, but concentrate on trying to speak to people about what's going on, trying to hit them around the sides and don't hit them head on. The government have everybody brainwashed in so many effective and brilliant ways. So the way to get to them is to wrap the truth around things that the government haven't owned, like politics, like remembering that politicians lie, the media lie, and not giving up, have conversations with people and be hopeful and put your energies into talking to people as much as you're going to put it into prepping for doomsday. And I'm not trying to make light of what you guys are saying. I know you're worried about what might be coming, but put as much energy into spreading the word, because the more people that are aware of what's going on, the less chance it has of actually coming to fruition, and we're all going to have to deal with it,
Yeah, I actually wanted to raise one point that Michael mentioned, because that was actually something that I was thinking about, because there is that idea that maybe the vaccination, right? That maybe, I know it's a little bit off the topic, but how to wake people up. So it seems like the vaccination seems to be at least a part of a trick, because probably a lot more people is saying, I don't really like the idea of, vaccination being joined with, the possibility of me traveling freely,
whatever, yeah.
stuff like that. And that's actually a subject that's been on at the minute, in the media, the subject of, one of the Australian airlines saying, oh, we're taking only the vaccinated people, of course,
Run by an
COVID-wise.
Irish guy.
Yes, and then Ryanair, for instance, said something different, to the contrary, and I think that may be one of the elements that possibly may wake people up a little bit. That's also
Absolutely.
kind of my personal experience with, let's say, people that I know, and they are still kind of comfortably sitting. Well, they know that this is all BS, but they're not doing anything about it, actively. But when I asked them, actually, what would be the last straw for you to actually, get up and do something about it, that would be the potentially mandated vaccination. So the other thing is that Michael mentioned that if, for instance, the social security stuff is gonna be connected with, oh, you need to be vaccinated, you need to be A, B, C, whatever, there's a lot of people actually living literally on social welfare with entire families in Ireland. Would that not really raise a bit of a commotion here,
I don't
in
know.
kind of in big numbers, because these are
I
quite
don't think so.
significant numbers for Ireland, when they tell you you're not gonna getting your money because you're not vaccinated. Would that not trigger a bit of a revolution here?
Well,
What do you think, Fiona or
I'd agree with
Michael?
Fiona what she said earlier, that there's a lot of compliance and a lot of brainwashing, and
Yeah.
I think it's sad to say, but there's so many people who will just go, yeah, give us a job there. Once I get me 203 quid every week, I'm happy.
Okay, that's
They
not good
don't
then.
care. It's not good, no. But just on that subject, it is a good way to show people that COVID is complete nonsense. It's a very easy line to draw between Neil Ferguson, Oxford University, and the vaccine cabal and all the vaccine companies, and the past, where it takes 6 to 10 years for a vaccine to be properly manufactured. There's a court case going on right now in the Irish courts from the swine flu scare that was also pushed by Neil Ferguson from Oxford 10 years ago. And that's still in the courts today. Hundreds of
Yes.
Irish people's lives have been ruined, So what
Yeah.
I would say to people who want to communicate, there was a few questions there that came through. I seen them popping up. How do you communicate to people?
Yeah.
It's very easy. Show them a news story from the Irish Examiner that shows that there's people still in court against the Irish government today whose lives have been ruined by rushed vaccines, and it's a window and a small kind of tunnel to get into people's brains that the government and the media haven't covered off. And then you say, look, this is happening again, so just to answer your question there, I don't think, sorry about the dole, I don't think stopping people's dole is going to wake people up, but I do think that the vaccine thing, if you approach it in the right way, is a good way to get through to people and talk to them, show them the history, show them the past, show them it runs in parallel to what's happening right now. And you know what? If they still haven't copped on at that point, move on. Start on someone else.
Okay, Fiona, what do you think? That's gonna be part of a
Listen,
trick, or
you know what? I only wish that people would even have a cop on now. There's certain groups of people that I'm aware of, and again, these are really intelligent people, and they can't wait for the vaccine.
It's bad.
And I'm just struggling. You know what? I am absolutely struggling. And again, family that I have in the UK. Oh, do you know the vaccine's coming soon? And it's just a blind spot. I cannot, personally, I cannot understand how anyone with 2 brain cells on active duty doesn't question something that's rushed out like this under a year. It's just beyond belief. But what's happened is, it's the virtue signaling. Dr.
Yes.
Marcus de Bruin was absolutely right when he said the face mask was the precursor to the vaccine. So they're all out there with their face masks thinking they're saving granny and they're saving their neighbor and I'm doing a great thing. And now this vaccine is, I'm not having the vaccine for me. I'm having it for you, and I'm having it for granny, and I'm having it for, and you see what a great little communist citizen I am, because I'm adhering to the common good, which is this abstract concept that nobody can quantify and nobody knows anything about, but it's dictating everything, and it's removing our individual rights. So look, Michael, you're more optimistic than me, and we need that. But again, I can see them all lining up, rolling up their sleeves and saying, give me double.
Do you think it's an IQ test,
okay?
Fiona?
Okay.
Let me just say why I think it's all an IQ test. And I know that might sound like
brutal,
superior, right? But look, think about it like this. Just let me draw a really quick picture for you, okay? You have Bill Gates, who's walking around for a year with no mask on. He's been saying for the last 10 years he believes in reducing the world's population. He's on the record of saying it, okay? He hasn't got a medical degree. He's completely unqualified in anything to do with vaccines whatsoever. He has been done in antitrust court cases in the US. He's a complete corporate megalomaniac. He has basically been telling everybody, look, I believe in depopulation. My father was a eugenicist who ran Planned Parenthood. He ran around telling everybody that they shouldn't have kids, and he believes in bloodlines, and he believes in getting rid of inferior bloodlines.
And he
Okay,
also
so
proved himself with deeds, because he killed people all over the world with his vaccines,
Exactly.
in India and
Exactly.
in
In
Africa.
India, yeah.
exactly.
Yeah,
So guys, so look at all that. Okay, so that's all on the record. Okay, he's putting it out there. Okay, so it's like that old thing. It has to be free will. You know, it's like the devil. The devil can't take your soul until you freely, willingly give it to him in exchange for something, right? So maybe, you know, and I know I don't really think this, but it's just a theory that's out there. Maybe it's like, you know what, we want stupid people to take the vaccine because we want to make humanity stronger. We want to hold on to the stronger genes to make the human race better, which is in the end what eugenics is all about, you know. So all I'm saying is maybe how they justify it in their minds, what they're doing, the people who are driving all this, is they're making the human race a better species or something, you know. And
or so
that's
they
probably
think.
This is
Okay.
So they
indeed a
think.
twisted,
Exactly.
a
That's
twisted
the point.
reasoning, and it's worthy of a globalist. So
Yeah,
maybe
they
it is like
have to
you're
have
saying,
some way.
but
Yeah.
that's just horrible. That's a horrible thing to think, you know.
It-
Yes,
If
but
this is
they have
really
to
what they
justify it,
think,
you know.
if
You
this
see,
is really
that's
what
all.
they think,
well, usually when you think about someone who is doing horrible things, they have a tendency to justify it somehow, right?
Yes.
To make
Yeah.
it look like they're
true.
actually doing something good or for the
Nazis did it,
greater good.
communists did it,
Yeah.
Yes,
they all
so
Yeah.
did it.
so maybe
Yeah.
there is something in it. Anyway, I just wanted to come back just for one more minute to that vaccine issue, because what gave me a little bit of hope was the fact that with the big plan to vaccinate the kids against flu this year, turned out that only 20% was vaccinated. So I thought maybe people got the message, at least, majority of them, that,
Yeah.
this is not really such a great idea to vaccinate kids against it. And maybe that is an indication that the COVID vaccine, it's not going to be that popular as we think might be, judging by the masks, and their popularity. So
Let me
what do you
just
think?
Let me just add before you guys answer that we discussed it in the previous episode, though it was in Polish, that actually the only effective vaccine that wiped out the disease was the measles vaccine
Yeah, measles
Oh,
was apparently
smallpox
quite.
maybe, was it?
or smallpox. One
I
Yes,
of
would say
those.
because it's,
smallpox.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Smallpox.
more than
Okay.
measles.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Because
Measles,
actually, just
yeah.
sorry, on the measles thing, it just so happens that with a friend, we were going through all the CSO data for the last 100 years and looking at measles, because, like, that's the sort of thing we do. And I mean, I can't say anything conclusively, but the trend in the data was that the incidences of measles in Ireland were on a way downward
Yeah,
trajectory, way
yeah.
before the vaccination was introduced. So, and there wasn't even a blip then. So it's really,
Yeah.
to me, very impossible to say. But I would certainly align with smallpox,
Yeah.
what my understanding is, more than
Mhm.
measles.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, smallpox, I think definitely is probably the one, but some of the, like measles definitely is not that popular, but there are some other problems with measles,
Yeah.
and actually mutating of that virus. So that's actually a completely different discussion, because it's quite a complex one. More complex that it looks on the surface, but
Yes, I
yeah.
double checked. It was smallpox. It wasn't measles.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
guys. It was
So
smallpox.
yeah, what do you think, Fiona? Just to wrap it up on the vaccine piece, is not that low uptake of the the flu vaccine for the kids not an indication that maybe people start,
Yeah, I mean,
worrying?
yes. I mean, obviously, my own anecdotal experiences notwithstanding, that information certainly is positive, and it does give me some hope that
Mm.
elements of the public won't be, conducive to this vaccine. And also, what suggests that is the case is the doubling down of the vaccine propaganda. I mean, Luke O'Neill and the kids. I mean, it's unbelievable
Yeah.
what's going on. We
Yeah.
have the Santa Claus ad, remember, it was Coca-Cola, and now it's a COVID-19. I mean, this is, to me, absolute desperation. And I
Yeah.
just echo what Michael said. Make no mistake, they've already told us that getting this vaccine is not going to stop the
Exactly.
lockdowns and the restrictions and the
Yeah.
mask wearing.
Yeah.
They've made it very, very clear. So the fact that the Irish media, the absolute monsters that they are trying to tell the public that, oh, we get back to normal with this, that is a lie. The
Yes.
public need to, well, obviously
Absolutely.
they'll never be told the truth. But what I fear, and maybe I'm going to get too negative here, is yes, I think they're destabilized by the lack of willingness to go for this vaccine. I do think that to me is happening. But therefore, I worry that they may regroup, because these are evil, you know what's. They'll go to plan B, plan C, plan D, plan E. And they may decide that, okay, well, we need to lock them up. We need to get them hungry. We need to get them desperate. And we need to then say, come out, get your vaccine, and then you can get your food. Now, again, I'm just looking at the bleakest scenario. I hope it never comes to that. But right now, I do think they're in a quandary, that we're not enthusiastic about the vaccine.
They are, but can I just say, a lot of people, again, when you talk to them about the vaccine, they don't understand why it might be a bad thing, and they find it very difficult to comprehend that people could be out to do them harm. Because a lot of people are very innocent and stuff like that. And one of the very useful things that I talk, like one of the things that I try and relate it to on the website, and it's a fact as well, is that like pre-COVID, our pharmaceutical exports made up over 60% of Irish exports. Okay, now it's gone up to probably 70-80% since COVID kicked off. Okay, now that is a very real driver of government policy, because if the opioid crisis lawsuits in the United States bring down more pharmaceutical companies, and Mallinckrodt has already gone into Chapter 11 protection in the US because of opioid crisis lawsuits, okay, if they do not get a massive new revenue stream, which is mass vaccine rollouts in multiple companies globally, more of them will be brought down. Okay, so if you're trying to relate to the viewers, people asked, how do you talk to people? The Irish government needs all of that income tax revenue, all of that sales tax revenue that comes from the money that people spend, the corporate tax revenue. All of the real estate people who own our political parties need pharmaceutical companies to stay here. They are literally the most important thing happening in our economy right now. Okay, so when people wonder why the government might be pushing vaccines on them that they don't need, when maybe 1 in 100 people might get an adverse reaction to them, the reason the government are willing to take that risk is because all the backhanders they've got for decades, all the people who back them, all of their money is at risk if the pharmaceutical industry does not get this new revenue stream. It's a powerful tool for people to use to talk to people, and it's based on complete economic fact. And it's one of the things that not enough people take into account. Okay, that's what's driving Irish government policy. Now, RTE and everybody else are in on it because RTE are on €500,000 a year. You don't think they're going to get a pay cut if we lose big pharma in this country? There's going to be cuts everywhere. So that's all I'm saying to you guys. You can be sure none of them will be taking the vaccine.
People pay less and less of the license as well, right? We've heard recently that there's 300,000 down. So that's a significant thing. Again, they will get money from somewhere else, which is essentially indirectly our taxes. Yeah, because they are being, funded by the government if they are short. But again, this is our taxes, right? So,
but there'll be no money left. There'll be no money left. You see,
if people
the Irish government can't go outside of EU budgetary constraints. That all the cream that's left on top, that 3 or 4% of a surplus that they use to push out through e-tenders to all their buddies, that'll be gone. And all of their wages are going to get cut. RTE are on board because they know what's at stake, and there's an elite network in this country of the establishment who are all going to be hurt if pharma is hurt. I mean, that's just an economic fact, so that's why vaccines are being pushed. You see, so try to communicate that to people more, I would say, to everybody listening.
I think it's a good point to show, how the pharmaceutical pharmaceutical. That person then probably is not listening.
Hey, that's fine.
But anyway, I think that's a good point to actually point out a mere fact how the big pharma is important for the Irish economics, how vital they are, how many of them is based here, and of course they're getting all the releases from all sorts of taxes.
And
So
Trump,
they,
Trump just sorry to
yeah,
really interrupt, but it's important
of
because we were
course,
talking about it earlier. Trump has just brought in a new, and there was an announcement last week. He brought in most favored nation status for the US, which means that they pay the lowest price of all nations who pay for on-patent drugs. And he's switching all of the Medicare drugs to generic drugs where possible. So in one fell swoop, because he went through all the statutory petitions and everything else that had to go through for the last year. In one fell swoop, he has destroyed big pharma's revenue streams. Now, in my opinion, that's why what we're seeing in Victoria is happening, and what we're seeing in different countries to push this vaccine narrative, and why it is going so hard right now. Because
But Michael, how do you explain Operation Warp Speed then, which
I have a
involves
theory on that.
DARPA, Oracle, Google,
Okay.
the military,
I have a theory on that.
Moderna?
Go on.
How do you explain that?
I
Go
know
on,
what you're
Michael.
saying, right? So here's my theory. Here's my theory, right?
It's a theory.
Okay, so
Okay.
So Trump needed to bring back the economy, okay? Would you agree with that? So he needed to bring back the economy, and everybody had been successfully driven into a complete scare festival by the media, okay? And unfortunately, many of those people that we were talking about earlier on in this program all believe that the vaccine is the only way out here, okay? Now, what Trump did over there was, in my opinion, he had to go along with that story. He couldn't say, no, we're not bringing along the vaccine, because the economy would have completely died. So I believe it was for public perception. He said that. Now, bear with me. I don't know what's in his new GSK vaccine. My own personal belief is that because of the storage constraints on that new vaccine, it'll never get rolled out. I think the whole warp speed thing is to take it out of the hands of the pharmaceutical companies who are pushing it out through all the different pharmacies like they did during the opioid crisis in the US. The reason he wanted it owned by the military was so that it wasn't owned by big pharma, which they've been going after through the opioid lawsuits, which I would urge everybody to read up on. So I do think that there might be something positive about what he's doing with warp speed.
I agree with Micah, and if I can jump in here and add my theory.
Yeah.
Also,
theory.
the vaccine is being done for optics. That is true.
I
And
agree.
in the end, I think we're not going to be relying on the vaccines. Once Trump is back in the office in January, we're going to switch to therapeutics. And that's going to be our main weapon against this virus, any other viruses, because we don't need the vaccine if we have such great therapeutics, and we have them. And the problem is that the big pharma is suppressing them. This is the big problem.
Yeah, look at
because
HCQ, right?
We have HCQ, we have many others, and there's going to be more released, I believe, also. So that's where the switch is going to happen. It's just gonna go this way, and the vaccine is, in the meantime, to keep vaccine hungry people satisfied for now. Like with the election, when we see that supposedly Biden won, the left side is at peace now. There is no riots. And when it all is going to be rolled out, then we can prepare. But on the one more word on the military. Why does Trump want to roll out the vaccine supposedly with the help of military? Well, whom else could he trust? If you can trust your military, whom can you trust? And I'm speaking on behalf of my country, where the military was destroyed long ago and turned against people. Look, if your country doesn't have a strong military, the country is dead. That's why our last hope is in the US, because their military woke up. They shook it off, this globalist BS, in time, because they were being killed. They noticed with, they could observe it year after year, how the Obama administration, together with Hillary as the main agent for the Benghazi, for example, as they were killing the military people slowly off.
Yeah, I think there's a sea change in the US with the military. They are
definitely
aware.
That's how it started. That's why Trump, now that the military has been cleaned off sufficiently, I believe, again,
Yeah, I
This
agree.
is the only entity that Trump can trust, and that's why he says, I'm going to roll it out with the help of military. But he already stated the vaccine, if there is a vaccine, it won't be obligatory.
won't be
It's not going to be
mandatory,
mandatory, right? So it's not like the army is going to force you. Actually, this is what the left side is trying to steer all this unrest about. They're saying there's going to be a coup, there's going to be military on the street. No, military is not your enemy, especially now that it's been taken care of, it's been sorted out. The military is to protect people, and we can rely on the military, and the US military is...
Well, you'd hope so. But there's one good thing about the
Yeah.
military since Trump came in, okay? And nobody can deny this. There has been eternal wars. I say the word eternal, but I was going to say for the last 20 years. But even if you go back to Vietnam and before that, okay?
But we haven't had it with Trump.
US president. He hasn't had a war. And
Exactly.
He has had more reason to go to war than anyone else. If you look at Iran, if you look at North Korea, he could have sent more troops into Afghanistan, into Iraq. All I would say is judge people by their behavior. It's the only real thing we have beyond paranoia and conspiracy to judge people. And he hasn't gone to war when he had the opportunity, despite the fact that he has built that military up better than it has been in 60 years, you know. If he's turning around and saying, look, I'm going to use the military to do vaccines, that same military is making huge amounts of drug busts on fentanyl that's been brought in, on the opioid drugs that have been destroying and gutting America for about 25 years, you know. And there's a piece on our website called The Emperor Has No COVID-19. This same thing happened 100 years ago in China. The exact same thing happened. The British and French ran opium into China for about 80 years after the first two opium wars. They gutted a nation. They gutted a rival. This is all empire that's going on, you know. So when he says the military are going to roll it out, once he's saying it's not mandatory, I'm happy. I mean that. And I don't 100% trust the military, but I'm happy once he's saying it's not mandatory.
Can I ask a question here?
Sure.
Of course,
You're
of course.
honestly happy and calling for the military to deliver vaccinations.
Well, Fiona,
in the US.
if it's not okay, so to honestly answer
Are you
your
honestly
question,
saying this to me?
I'm going to answer your question, and I'm going to give you a really good reason why.
I already explained my stance, so...
So, number one, if it's not mandatory, I'm happy for people who are in really at-risk categories, which is the people we should have been protecting from the start, if they're going to get a vaccine. Okay, I don't care if the military deliver it, if the postman delivers it, or if whoever.
So are you saying you think the vaccine is safe then?
No, I'm not at all. But what I'm saying to you,
why would you want the at-risk people to get it?
I don't want them to. But what I'm saying is, you asked me a question. Why would I be happy for the military to do it? If you look at the opioid crisis lawsuits that are already have awarded $500 million on numerous different instances against major pharmaceutical companies in the US, okay? All of those drugs were doled out by pharmaceutical companies, by massive pharmacy chains, by Medicare, which Obama brought in. All of that complete pharmaceutical network were the people who delivered those drugs that have now been found to have been rackets, hugely illegal programs to push majorly addictive opioid pain medication onto American citizens. And it really has gutted and destroyed so many children's lives, women's lives, families' lives across the United States. It's an epidemic way bigger than COVID ever was, okay? That's why I would be happy for anyone other than that to dole out a potentially safe vaccine or any kind of drugs. Those people are not trustworthy. It's all a profit motive. The pharmaceutical industry is a sickness industry. You know, it's a subscription service. They're out to make us ill, and they're out to keep us ill as far as I'm concerned. And for the most part, obviously some of the stuff they provide is good, but you know yourself, I think we both agree on that. So that's just an answer to that question. That's why I'm happy for the military to dole it out.
Okay,
if somebody wants it, you know,
I think
stupid enough to take it, fine.
Yeah, I think that maybe there is a bit of a difference between the States and the situation in Europe. So
that's for sure.
Maybe there is a particular situation in the States that possibly this scenario might be a better option. Whereas in Europe, I don't think you can apply that because as far as I can see, the police, well, military is not yet that much on the streets. Well, they starting being, you know, here and there in the UK, right? But we see how the police is acting up recently in various countries, against the protesters and in other situations. So that doesn't really make me very hopeful for any uniform service to be, spread it all over the place and start delivering and policing whatsoever in Europe.
I don't think it will happen
But
here. No, that won't happen here. No.
well, hopefully, but I'm just saying.
They just pay doctors and pharmacists.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that situation here on the other side of the pond seems to be a little bit different, maybe, and that's why you hold that kind of view where Fiona is really concerned, and rightly so, about any,
No, I am concerned
uniform,
as well,
services.
I would
on the
never
street.
want the
Yeah.
military on the streets
Yeah,
at all.
No,
It's
me
just
neither.
like-
No, me
It's just
neither.
like saying, give up my constitutional rights, the government will give it back in 3 weeks.
No, I agree with you,
Fact,
Fiona,
Trump
completely.
signed an executive order removing US citizens' constitutional rights. Fact, he renewed that order. They still don't have their constitutional rights. That worries me. And the military worries me. The whole distribution of these vaccines globally, because this is not just America, as you said, it's
Yes, of
around
course.
the world. You've Boris Johnson, bellicosing over there in the UK. You've got, it's even in the Middle East, they're already talking about how they're going to distribute these vaccines. So this is a global issue, and
I agree with you there, Fiona, totally.
the whole therapeutics angle on it. Now you're getting into sort of your 5G chess, and I just don't get that, because Trump has gone along with it. He even had COVID. He hasn't called a hoax on this in any shape or form. So
Well, could he though? Could he, Fiona? Like, and I know what you're saying, and I do agree with you.
Why would he
on
have COVID? Why would he get his COVID for 3 days? I mean, why do that? Why signal like that?
Well, I don't think it was virtue signaling, right? It was probably a political move. I'm not defending him on that, but a lot of politicians will do things before an election. Look, I'm fine, and he's also 74, so maybe he wanted to show all the elderly people in the US who were scared, who were staying in their homes, hey, look,
Awesome.
I'm fine.
But he also
Now, what bugged me about
But he also then invalidated hydroxychloroquine because he'd been taking it originally, and he made a big deal
Yeah,
of that,
he
and
went
that
with
was
remdesivir,
great. But
didn't
then
He
came
also
out-
added that he stopped taking it for a certain period of time. That was the explanation why he got it. He stopped taking
he
it
did-
because he felt well, and then he got it. That's how I understood it.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think he did go with remdesivir. So I know what you're saying, Fiona. I know exactly what you're saying,
doesn't
and
fit with me, any of it.
I get what you're saying. All I would urge you to consider is the possibility that a lot of what he's doing is for optics. And I'm not here defending Trump. I might sound like I am, but I think the whole military thing in the US is a bit of a red herring. The fact is, there's a vaccine gold rush on right now. Everybody's trying to get involved. Everybody's trying to get paid off. All we have to work out is who's trying to stop people getting sick in the future and being really damaged by these vaccines, and who isn't. And at the end of the day, how many more people are we going to be able to persuade not to get a vaccine if they're going to get it? Probably not that many, So I'm just more interested in who's on the good side and who's on the bad side, and I'm still trying to work that out, to be honest.
When it comes to my stand on the military, it's that's because I'm familiar with the General Michael Flynn's book, The Field of Fight, in which he explains what was going on. I mean, this is officially a book about terrorism, and we can assume, or it's laid out actually, that this is he means the war with the Islamic terrorism, but actually we can just as easily translate it to all different kinds of terrorism we are dealing with or facing right now. So
Inside job kind of thing, yeah.
I'm sorry.
Inside job as well, not kind of external
Definitely.
enemy, but also internal enemy.
Definitely, and that's why I brought up this example of Benghazi. I think 2012, when when the military was basically told by by Hillary Clinton, Obama's right hand back then, to stand down and not defend. When the attack on the embassy happened, the military was told to stand down, guys. You can see that somebody inside was killing our own people. that's how, that's how military connected the dots, and that's how
I would agree.
this is the main reason why military decided to go against the globalist cabal. That's why, and my, again, theory why Trump, not being a globalist but opposing them, why he's still alive while Kennedy got shot, Reagan got shot, and later, after he got out of the hospital, he wasn't really functioning. They basically turned him into a vegetable. Why is Trump still alive? And I would credit it. No, I would credit it to the military, because he has a protection. Because the military
I think
people.
so. Yeah.
Because the military
and
people,
there's been so many threats against his life, and maybe
there
the
were
COVID
so
thing
many
was-
attempts,
That's all documented,
Yeah.
Yes.
Look,
It's
again,
an interesting view, definitely, and worth looking into, I guess. So maybe
once he doesn't make it mandatory, I'm
Mhm.
happy. Once if Trump turns around and says mandatory vaccines are happening, then he's not getting a Christmas card from me this year.
But guys, the issue on that, and I just want to finish on the mandatory. I apologize, because I think it's a very important point generally. People sort of say, at least it's not mandatory. And yes, I get that, at least then we have the choice. But the problem then will be that we won't be able to work. We won't be able to get that airplane.
I agree.
We won't be
I
able
agree.
to transact. We won't be able to go into a shop. We will have, because we don't have our digital ID. We don't have our quantum dot tattoo. So not making it mandatory is great, because obviously we don't have to take it. But, we'll end up being marginalized from society anyway.
Potentially. But one thing I would say to that, Fiona, is, we have had the fear shot up us for a year. Now, a lot of us have been saying from January, this is all nonsense, and banging our heads against a brick wall. They're the same people who are saying you're going to need it for the airplane. You're going to need it to go shopping. You're going to need it to go to a restaurant. What I would say is, I think we're going to continue to hear that, but I don't necessarily think it's going to come into being, because it's discrimination at the end of the day. We do have constitutional protections. It might take a while for people to have successful legal challenges, but I think what the whole airline stuff, the travel stuff, is part of the fear game, just to sell more vaccines, to sell more fear. And I think ultimately, as long as enough people talk about it, they're not going to be able to push through with the end game of saying you can't get on a plane unless you have a vaccine. At the end of the day, Qantas are saying that right now. Australia is a bit of a basket case, but you won't see any other airline saying it, because they know they could be successfully sued. I do think we need to take some of it with a pinch of salt. It's not all doom and gloom. We need to point out to people that they can't do these things, and we need to assert that. I think that's very important. I just wanted to make that point. I don't think it's going to end up with the forecast that they're making, because they can't legally do it, And as soon as you tell someone you have to get something, especially an Irish person, they'll do the opposite. If you told everybody in Ireland they can't go to mass, the churches would be packed on Sunday. Well,
they're not
that would have
packed
been a
yet.
year or two ago. Yeah, true.
Exactly.
Anyway,
So, guys,
I'm hopeful on that.
I basically agree with this point of view, and I would like to say, don't give in to fear, because I understand all those scenarios. They've been rolled out. Some people read them 20 years ago. I'm just getting familiar with them all now. And I'm happy actually that I didn't get on it 20 years ago, because by now I might have been pretty paranoid, worrying about what's gonna happen. And I am jumping on the bandwagon basically now with the Trump administration and all the good changes that it is bringing, in my opinion. And I feel really relieved. But anyway, we were going to play you a video of the Great Reset video. Unfortunately, we can't do it because we already got a copyright strike or something like that. So I would just like to encourage you to watch this short clip. It's literally called The Great Reset, coming from the World Economic Forum. You can easily find it on YouTube. And we didn't really talk much about Klaus Schwab, whatever his last
Yoda.
name is. Yeah, but I just if I may, because I think we should be slowly rolling to the end, right?
Yeah.
Because we're already an hour and a half in. So if I may just say a few
Wrap it
words
up.
of comments, yeah. I just want to say, guys, please watch any of the videos with Klaus Schwab or Schwab, however you want to pronounce it. And in my opinion, this person is a caricature of a human being, a complete caricature. And he's just like a villain from those James Bond movies.
Exactly.
Exactly.
He's been put up there, for people to nearly see.
Yeah, but you know,
wearing the costume and everything.
Yes, and he has this exaggerated German accent. It's like 100%, 200% villain. It's all like by a script, some kind of evil scenario, and they're putting it all up. Yes, and you know what? I'm looking at this guy, and if Kasia, when we were preparing for this live stream, if Kasia didn't send me those videos and I came across this guy somewhere on the internet on YouTube, I wouldn't even pay attention for a second. I would just move on instantly because this guy is just funny, Yeah. This guy is just funny, and I can't believe people are actually taking him seriously.
Well, I get
but they do, and that's an interesting part of the story, because when you actually look more closely, how he speaks and what kind of message does he convey, it wouldn't. I would say it would be funny if it wasn't really terrifying. That just what he actually tries to turn the world into, and how
he is a caricature,
a problem for him. Yeah, but of course, the way he presents himself, the way he speaks, that does bring that connotation with those villains from various movies, and maybe this is some kind of, maybe he just overplays. I think a lot of people involved in this Great Reset, COVID-19 and everything,
they overdid it.
Oh yes, they're overplaying their hand.
Go on, Michael.
There's a theory. It was written by a guy called Manly P. Hall. He's one of these kind of, you can look into him yourselves, but his theory was that every now and again humanity needs to be stoked up. It's like you're boiling a stew for like 4 hours. It needs to be stirred up, because we were going into a period of like total stagnancy and stasis, and we just weren't doing anything with our lives. And suddenly we've been made in the last year to realize what's important, what we should do. And there's a theory, and I'm not saying it's true, but if you wanted to look at it like it was some kind of a play or a movie, and he's the villain and everything else, and these caricatures are popping out, they're not credible people, and people can see through them. And I wouldn't say that that's being done deliberately, but maybe we're only getting the fruitcakes because nobody serious wants to get behind this idea of a great reset and everything else. Now, if you look towards the US just for a second on that subject, all the people who Biden has named in his new cabinet, they're all complete duds. They're also Rands. They're not big names. Nobody in the Democrat Party wants to put their hand up and say, I want this job and I want that job, because the steal is so obvious, Now, I would say that the same thing could be applied to this Great Reset and the whole vaccine scam. And that's why we're seeing clowns like Charles Schwab, who's clearly a Bond villain. He just was a bad actor, and that's why he wasn't cast in a James Bond film 20 years ago. This is why we're seeing meatballs like him rolled out to deliver it, because they're getting desperate. They're getting desperate to push this agenda across, and that's why we're not getting really classy, credible, cromulent, for want of a made-up word from The Simpsons, people who can deliver this message. And I think that's something, again, to be hopeful of. We're seeing the worst who are telling us all this stuff. Have you noticed that? We're seeing all the worst kind of people who are trying to persuade us that we need a vaccine. The Great Reset is great. Biden should be our president. So I would just say it's another reason for people to be optimistic.
So this whole Biden's cabinet that he was supposedly appointing today, I mean, they're just all sad figures.
Yeah, they're all
very sad figures.
They're all nobodies. I mean, it's the same as Fine Gael here. Appointing, secretaries and male or female secretaries, or T-boys, which actually Simon Harris was a T-boy and he got appointed as Minister of Health. But if you take him away, it's the same thing. They're taking all the people who will take anything. So I think that's a good thing.
But we should still be, vigilant.
Aware.
but because somebody actually pointed out here in the chat that these people are still very dangerous. They have a lot of
They are.
connections among powerful others, and they are all kind of shaking hands together, meeting soon in Davos and all of that. So we need to also have an eye on what's gonna happen in Davos. But they also have, power,
Money.
whether it's over and money, yes, over our souls, or the perception, because with the constitution that was, that point was raised a few times here, that we have quite a strong constitution here in Ireland. But I think people just completely forgot about it, or they think there is this perception put out that government can take and give back, how they please, your rights, whereas we know that the rights are, God or creator or whatever given, right, depending on whether somebody is a believer or not, but they are yours and they are not for anybody to take away. But of course you need, like another person, Ben Gilroy, likes to say, you need to exercise them like a muscle, right? Because if you do not exercise it, it's gonna kind of go weak. And people need to be aware that they have the rights and nobody has really the power to take them away. However, they are trying, because recently I think today, Tracy O'Mahony put a post saying that all those penalties now are, published, and they will be, charging you €100 if they think they don't get a good answer for why you are out, 5 kilometers further than 5 kilometers, away from your house or something like that. So this is a real, of course, threat. And if people see, money attached to something that they do, and they potentially may just pay it on the spot, or then you'll be dragged to the court, of course it raises, concerns, fears, and majority of people will just, comply. So we need to as well convey this message that we still have the power, that we still have the rights in the constitution, and the constitution is above everything else. And people need to get a little bit more brave and just get into that conversation kindly with the policeman and explain.
Yes,
Right. And I think it's a good point to remind people that they can't just take our rights away just because they want to, because they are not theirs to take.
Yes, and I wanted to add here, like I said, this people like Klaus Schwab, they have to be ridiculed. But at the same time, because we all know that Europe is a stronghold for the global elites. It's not like in the US. I'm pretty optimistic about the US. I feel really free here, honestly. And maybe that's where my optimism is coming from, because I see a lot of people who are not only waking up, but I also see a lot of people who are really actively fighting. And this is what I wanted to finish on. Like, first of all, people like that, they have to be ridiculed, those globalists. But on the other hand, we have to fight. We really have to put up a fight, and we have to put up a fight like it's a fight for our lives, because that's what's happening, because we're losing our freedoms. And was it Reagan that said we are always just one generation from losing our freedoms? And this is a lesson, every generation has to learn, has to go through, because if we don't, we forget, and we're being easily manipulated and treated like cattle, and we don't want that. So I just wanted to give like a very blatant example of the certain mishandling that was happening in regards to the funds. I'm not an expert on economy. That's why it's always tricky for me to talk about those issues. But from my friends' own experience, some friends who are Americans but who lived in Europe for some time, they noticed a very interesting thing. In Germany, when you take a loan, or when you have a credit card, when you take some sort of a credit, you have a negative interest rate. Negative interest rates. So you borrow, let's say, I don't know, €100,000, but you only have to give back €80,000.
Really?
And I think that's how it more or less translates. But the whole point is that the German economy and other European economies, they were subsidized. They were being subsidized from the US money.
Okay, I get what
And
you're saying.
Trump pointed to it. He said it many times unofficially when I was following his press conferences. He pointed to Germany as being delinquent. Most of the time he would say so when he was discussing that they're not contributing enough to the NATO, and he was singling them out, and he was praising Poland and many other countries that were paying their fair share. But Germany and France, I guess. There were a few other countries, and he was saying they were delinquent. But this is a very blatant, very vivid example with what is happening in Germany, that they have negative interest rates.
And you can take that and translate it across Europe with regards to pharmaceuticals, financial services.
Yes, exactly. That's why Trump...
And manufacturing industries, which you can take to China as well.
That's why Trump punched Big Pharma with this bill. But anyway...
On the bigger picture, that's very important what you said. Europe is leeching off the US.
Yes, exactly. Guys, that's what you need to realize, that all this social welfare that everybody is so happy about, and everybody's like, oh, Europe is so great. There are so many Americans who want to escape to Europe because they have this social plans put in the works. Guys, this is all piggybacking of the US. They're all leeching off and parasiting of the US. There is nothing is for free. You gotta understand it. You gotta understand it.
There is the good saying that there is no such thing like free lunch. But okay, I don't know, Fiona. Maybe you want to kind of close off with how you see it. Is there any hope? What can we do?
Loads of hope.
Of course, I'm sure.
Yes, I agree on that. Let's keep fighting, guys.
Hope always that is last, but of course we need to be vigilant. We need to be realistic, and we need to have some kind of backup plan, or maybe even 2 or 3. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, our best hope is mass civil disobedience. If we all got up tomorrow, all of us, absolutely every single one of us, and just went back to normal ourselves, this thing would be over.
Yes.
In our countries, it would be over. I mean, obviously there would be a mess to clear up. We would have, obviously economic fallout from what's gone on, people with their healthcare delayed, but that would do it. But we need that.
We need that. We need numbers. So again, we kind of go down.
We need the numbers. Yeah.
Guys, we're doing our part. We're here asking people to stand up and fight. Let's keep fighting.
At least ask the questions. At least ask the decent questions, not to take everything at the face value, not to listen to everything that it's coming from the radio and the TV.
That's the least.
Just try to see discrepancies, try to work out whether it's all holding together, or if it's not, what's really behind it. Just ask the questions, and don't think that economy and kind of life around you will just sort itself out, because there is another saying that even Solomon is not gonna pour anything out of an empty vessel, right? So if nobody's working, almost nobody's working, everything is being closed and stuff like that, so it's not gonna end up nicely. It's gonna be probably way worse than with the last crisis. So we need to get prepared, and we need to be really reasonable about it. Apart from the fighting, we need to be preparing for a big crisis this way or another. We're gonna pay for that year of not doing anything, and it's not gonna just go away in an instant. So people need to be aware of this.
Overwhelm you as well. People are letting everything overwhelm them. Just it's like it's eating an elephant. You got to eat it one bite at a time. Take your time. Don't let things overwhelm you. Work on one person a day. Say hello to one person walking down the street with a mask on. One person a day. That's all it takes. An elderly person walking down the street with no mask on. They were invisible before COVID. They're even more invisible now. So stand there and have a chat with them, even if it's 2 meters away, and say, look, maybe you don't need that mask, but ask your doctor. He'll give you more information. Do something that's good. Pay it forward. It's all little ripples that'll turn into big waves.
Invite people to your lift when you are just alone. This is, for instance, what my husband loves to do. And when somebody says, no, you go, take your lift. And I say, what? Are you waiting for the vaccine? So like anything like that can actually start a conversation, and it did
Yeah,
work for us
absolutely.
many times, that you actually connected with your neighbor, with someone in the shop, anyone, and maybe put that seed of doubt, is this all really making sense, or maybe not necessarily. So
Yeah, exactly. And
yeah.
never tell people to look something. Never say look it up to people. Talk to them. Ask them questions. What do they think about things? It's
Yeah.
very easy to do once you start talking to people.
Okay.
I
What's
always tell people to do they should do their own research though, because I don't want them to
Yeah,
just
no,
take
it's
it at
just
the
that
face
word. Look it
value.
up. Look it up. It's kind of
Yeah, no,
people
but
don't do it.
people are a bit, lazy these days. So
That's
sometimes
true.
That's for sure.
it's good to maybe give them one or two nuggets, and then maybe that sparks the interest. I don't know what's your strategy. Just at the end, I will ask Fiona, what's your strategy, kind of day to day? How do you do those
Yeah,
little
I mean,
things?
sometimes I talk to people, and sometimes they're so masked up that I just can't do it. I mean, there was one
Yeah.
time I stopped this gentleman was the only one not wearing a mask in this coffee shop with me, so I smiled at him and said, "Oh, I'm glad to see you." And he said, "I've just forgotten my mask. I can't wait for the vaccine."
Oh
And off
no.
he went, and I thought maybe he knows who
Oh,
I am. Maybe he's actually seen me. On
Yeah.
other
yeah,
occasions, I have more enthusiasm for it. And yeah, sometimes I say, oh, this isn't really normal. I mean, look what these lockdowns are doing. Oh, but think of the positives, So a lot of people are still thinking, oh, well, it's great, and there are some good things coming out of this. There's no question about it. I like shopping locally. I've gotten to know local grocers, local butchers, and I really enjoy that
Yeah.
relationship now. And I
yeah,
wish I had done it earlier. I've gone off the big sort of shopping centres and supermarkets and things. That has been one of my changes. I'm more
I
in
think
touch
it's
with
great.
nature. Yeah, I
Yeah,
enjoy walks more. I
yeah,
treasure that. So yes, there have been good things, but in terms of tackling people on a day-to-day basis, yeah, I mean, it's not easy, but I agree. We need to maybe just chink away
Yeah.
gently, not
gently. Yeah,
confrontationally. I
no,
don't
not
want to upset
confrontation.
them,
No, no,
because a
Yeah.
no.
lot of people are really afraid.
The
Yeah,
thing to
that's true.
remember, one thing to just remember is that in every single living room in this country, and I would say 95% of them, there's a little monster sitting in the corner, and it's just breathing and it's sitting there and it's like, and people know it's there, but they don't want to look at it. They don't want to acknowledge it. They don't want
Yeah,
to acknowledge the fact that nothing adds up, but they're not going to look at it because they're saying, you know what? It's not doing me any harm right now. It's
yeah,
not causing me any hassle. And if I go and look
yeah.
at that there, I'm going to have to kick it out of the house. And my whole reality might potentially crumble.
Yeah,
Everybody
I
is
think
in that
that's
situation,
saying that's the
you know.
that's the fear, the main
Yeah,
fear. I think
it's
people do not
there.
like to
They don't want it.
face
So
the reality, which is sometimes
exactly.
not very nice, and it's painful. And
Unfortunately, sooner or later, we all gonna have to do it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and
Exactly.
no,
this
but
is as great as an opportunity as any other,
yeah, no,
Yeah.
So
but it's just this proverbial kicking can down
No,
the
but
road,
I don't
right?
know. The point on the monster thing is that when you say something to people, just because you don't get a good reaction from them there, don't be dissuaded. And I'm not saying confront people with masks and say, what are
Yeah,
you
yeah,
doing? But just having a conversation and dropping something in, even though you might not get a favorable response, then when they go back home and they're thinking about the monster in the corner,
yeah,
they might be more inclined to deal with it and talk to their
yeah,
friends about helping them kick it out of the house, because it is in most people's minds. Don't feel like you're alone. Colette was there on the live chat and she was saying, how do you persuade people? You need to understand most people know there's something wrong. They're just at different stages and they're all going to get there eventually. So all you can do really is help people on their journey, and don't be too
too
downhearted
pushy.
when you don't have
Yeah,
people who turn around straight away and say, oh my God, you're
yeah,
right. It's all a scam,
yeah,
which it is a
yeah,
scam,
yeah,
but you're not going to
yeah,
get that.
yeah, the
yeah.
the opposite strategy also doesn't work when somebody runs after me asking why I don't wear a mask. Like, dude.
Yeah, no, of course, confronting people, like head on, and making them, angry or embarrassed, for instance, it's definitely not a good strategy, because we don't want to put people off, but we want to actually draw them a little bit in, and let them see things, a little bit from our point of view, and that's the goal, right? Not that we think that we are right and this is some kind of righteous thing we are doing. No, we just want more people to realize that we are in a real conundrum and
Yeah.
we need to do something about
And,
it.
and we're not crazy. We're not crazy for saying it. Like, I wear a suit to the supermarket these days because it breaks people's brains when they see me walking around the aisles with a basket and I'm really well dressed. And they're like, "Oh my God, he doesn't look like a knacker or an electrician with all his work clothes on, or an anti-masker. He looks like a professional." My
That's the
brain is breaking.
authority trick,
Great thing
right?
to do.
You should also have a plaque saying PhD
Yeah,
in
I have a doctor.
epidemiology or something, and then like everybody's like, oh, this man
Sorry,
is
you
right.
broke it
Yeah,
there,
I mean, this is a sad thing, but you know what? It works on people. Like, if you don't have a PhD and you dare to discuss
lost you
those
there,
topics,
sorry.
you're a charlatan. That's what we keep hearing, right?
Yeah, no, people definitely look up to the authority, and that's probably one of the reasons why we can't break through to so many people, because they see, Professor Luke O'Neill and other famous figures, saying this, that, and the other, and they just take it as something, valid, and these are the experts, they know what they're talking about. So experts also make mistakes, and there's quite a lot of them recently that they were on the wrong side of things,
And
doing
some are just
modeling.
running a propaganda, and that's it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes,
But
yeah.
some of them are con men. Like, literally, Luke O'Neill is a scammer. He is literally.
If not most of them.
He's a used car salesman. He's worse
Yeah.
than Delvin.
Yeah, I've heard
really
he
is.
had actually some papers, retracted from whatever journal. So
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
it
Make it
would be
public.
interesting.
Yeah.
It would be. I think it's somewhere somebody told me that it's kind of sugar coated, in the public domain. However, even if you look at his finances and how he's connected with all those companies, that
Yeah.
should alone make people think, that at the end of the day, there is a lot of conflict of interest, with those people that are out there, telling you that you should do that and you should do this.
Like,
So
there's a long tradition in Ireland of high profile scammers. Okay. No, I mean that, like, the previous housing minister, his dad stole millions from Gay Byrne. Okay, it's on the record, everybody knows about it, and yet two of his kids are very famous people, and his son got a major ministerial position in the Irish government. Okay, this is accepted here. It's a shakedown, and people don't go after it. We don't have a watchdog to watch the police. We don't really have a proper investigative body within the police to look at white collar crimes. Luke O'Neill, I'm not going to call him a criminal on your show, because whatever impacts that may have, but I would personally say that I can see from his past and from the fact that he's lying about masks and the efficacy of masks and the science that was out pre-COVID on masks, that if he says on one hand he's a research scientist, then on the other hand he's a bald-faced liar, and he is willfully lying to the Irish people, because he's either a research scientist or he can't read research science. Okay, so the jury is not out on science, on mask science. They do not stop viral spread. Okay?
So just another scammer like
Luke
Bill Gates
O'Neill is
or
a
Klaus
scammer.
Schwab.
Luke O'Neill,
Yeah, no, but-
exactly. He's
yeah.
a scammer. He took 30 million from Enterprise Ireland for his failed vaccine tech. Okay, and that is what that was for cancer therapeutics. Okay, now he's using that same tech that he developed in Opsona with Enterprise Ireland, Irish taxpayer money, and he is applying it to COVID. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't work, because there's nothing for him to cure, because our own immune systems cure COVID. Luke O'Neill he's like Abe Simpson selling grandpa's cough syrup. He's just a total shyster. And more people are realizing it, which is fantastic as far as I'm concerned, and the more we can spread about him and use him as an example, the better. Sorry, I just can't stand Luke O'Neill. He's like the dregs of humanity.
Okay, Fiona, would you like to wrap up, because we are going on and on and on. We can't really finish.
I know we could go on forever.
It's been 2 hours now.
I do share your sentiments about Luke O'Neill. It's very, very sad. It's very unfortunate, and it is the mask science. I agree with you, Michael. As it stands now, as they're peddling it, is their pseudoscience.
Yeah.
They are peddling pseudoscience for real science,
Mm-hmm.
and that is wrong. They are misleading the public. They
Yep.
are misinforming everybody. And that is reprehensible. You know, as a
Yes.
professor of Trinity College Dublin, I really don't know how, and I'll say this publicly, I don't know how he sleeps nights.
No,
I
me
really
neither.
don't. The
Yeah.
money he
Yeah.
gets for what he's doing, that will be no compensation to the
It's
loss of
curious,
his
isn't
conscience
it?
and the loss of his soul
Yeah.
for what
It's
he's doing
curious.
to us.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean,
That
one
He's
can
I,
only draw the
damned.
conclusion. One can only
yeah.
draw the conclusion that
Unless he
maybe it's not
repents.
about money. Yeah, maybe it's not
Yeah.
about
Yeah.
money. You know, maybe he wasn't sleeping well prior to COVID, and now he sleeps better because something else has been taken off his mind, whatever that may be.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's very
Yes.
strange what's going on there, and the media are backing him, and certain elements in RTE have championed him, which really needs to be looked at. The likes
Yeah.
of Claire Byrne has flashed an open wallet with various euro bills in them on a couple of different segments since the COVID crisis began. And it's almost like they're saying, look, we're doing this for the cash. She's another vaccine saleswoman. She doesn't ask any questions, just like nobody else at RTE. And again, I think it all comes back to the economic impact of pharma failing. If pharma fails, so many gravy trains are going to be ended in Ireland. And it's an important part of this puzzle for people to consider.
Yes. Okay, so on this point, I think we have to wrap up. It was a fascinating conversation. I really liked it. I like the fact as well that it's not like we all kind of sing the same tune, that Fiona has her
Are we going to think?
opinion of things, and Michael has something different to say about a given subject. So I like there's been a lot of dynamic here, and people can take a lot of things to ponder on. Essentially, that's what
We're just
we
being a great example of how opposite views can come together and discuss, right?
exactly, and we don't have to
It's
agree on
possible.
everything, yes, but we still have the main aim that we want to just shake a little bit the things and help people think constructively and critically about the reality. And you don't have to agree with absolutely everything that we are saying, but just think about it, just make your own observation. Do your research if you want. Look into all those little things that we mentioned. They are getting into quite a bigger picture. And that's our really point, to wake people up to critically, to thinking critically, essentially. And as I said, thank you very much to both our guests. Fiona, it's been an absolute pleasure and honor to have you with us. And we are very, very also grateful for kind of last minute pop-in from Michael and his very valid, points and different perspective on things. So it's been fantastic. I hope everybody as well in our, live chat and our audience also enjoyed it.
Yeah,
And
thanks
thanks
to
for
the
all
host as well. You guys have been
yeah,
great as well.
yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you,
And
guys. You've been great.
Thanks, Fiona.
Thank you very
and
much.
there's always an open invitation for both of you, our dear guests, to pop in for another conversation, maybe another time.
So in the end, we managed to finish it on a positive note. So let's keep it up, guys.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, guys.
Thank
Good
And
night
see you
to
soon.
everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take it easy.
Bye.
Bye bye.